This video is about place and is the last of 6 videos about current conditions for ClemsonNEXT, the strategic plan for land development for the City of Clemson. In most planning efforts, place gets much of the attention. If this were a dinosaur exhibit in a children's museum, place is the T-Rex. And why not? It's about the things that we can tangibly see and touch and feel. If we think about the physical elements of a city being composed of streets and buildings and parks and transportation networks, when these elements are assembled well, they contribute to place. It's the areas of our city that we love, that we're attached to, that we identify our city as being part of.
In virtually every city, there are areas that are rich in place, areas devoid of place, and areas that are somewhere in between. And so in any plan, a community needs to figure out, what do we need to preserve, protect, and celebrate? What can we or should we redevelop to meet our needs now and in the future? What areas need some enhancement without wholesale change?
This is about asking the question, what did we inherit as a community, and what do we want to do about it? In this video, we're going to define what place is. We're going to explore development at different densities in the City of Clemson. And we're going to begin to explore thinking about where development might be able to occur in the future. And after all that, we're going to ask you to take a survey and tell us what you think. Place seems like a hard to define concept. Well, the truth is there's no one element that makes a great place, but here are 6 easy ways to think about the elements that contribute to a quality place. Number 1, livability.
This is about spaces that are what planners call human-scaled. They're designed for people and incorporate things like street trees and the design of public spaces and buildings that relate well with one another.
Number 2, walkability and bikeability.
How easy is it to get around without a car? This includes having infrastructure that is supportive of pedestrians, especially at street crossings, but also signage that is scaled to pedestrians and shade from the sun.
Number 3, vibrancy.
A vibrant place is simply defined as one where you see lots of people. Foot traffic. Vibrancy requires storefronts, housing, food, culture, entertainment, arts. At what times of the day are the different areas in Clemson vibrant?
Number 4, dynamism and resiliency.
This is discussed in great detail in the resiliency video, and it is about how well your business ecosystem supports diversity, startups, and innovation.
Number 5, anchors and amenities.
This is really about identifying current and future attractions, ranging from a grocery store to a park to a library, and harnessing them in order to support and sustain other businesses and placemaking efforts.
And number 6, accessibility and inclusion.
When something is understandable, welcoming, and convenient, it is accessible and inclusive. Our communities send lots of messages, conscious and unconscious, to the elderly, young people, families, people of color, and persons with disabilities about access and inclusion.
Now we're going to take a couple of minutes to deep dive transportation, which closely relates to accessibility, because we know it's top of mind for so many people in this community. Over the past 60 years, the way our communities have been designed, if we look at this from the outside, objectively, it's a clear message. They're designed for cars. In fact, our major roads and thoroughfares have become so hostile and inhospitable to anything but cars that over decades, many times unconsciously, we started designing our neighborhoods so that they no longer faced these commercial corridors or connected to them.
In doing away with the connected street pattern or street grid, developments in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s cut off a lot of shortcuts for cars, bikes, and pedestrians to get from their house at point A to, say, their friend's house at point B. This leaves little choice but for most people to get on the road by car to make trips long and short. This further clogs traffic on the main roads and makes them more congested, more polluted, and less hospitable. When we look at Clemson's arterial street network, it exhibits many of these characteristics. There are just a few roads with which to get around or through.
And as we'll further discuss, with so little land available for development in this community, Clemson greatly needs the land on either side of those commercial corridors to be available for the creation of a place that's more resilient and inclusive and livable. And that means that the roads themselves are going to have to change over time in order to support that.
Every effort is going to be needed to reduce the number of cars on the road, and that means more transit, more bikes, more pedestrians, and the accommodation of technologies that perhaps haven't even been invented yet.
This is going to require a very different way of thinking about how communities are designed. But make no mistake, the communities that take action on this are going to be more economically resilient, more inclusive, and more character-rich places for decades to come.
It's not really news that density has a major impact on the experience of place. As we've discussed, it impacts affordability, retail spending potential, and traffic. But perhaps most directly and concretely, density is all about how much land is used for development. And when we compare it to other communities, we start to see that Clemson is really a very low density place. Let's look at an example of lower density in Clemson's single-family neighborhoods, 4 units per acre. Here's what that looks like in Clemson and in Athens, Georgia. Many communities are designed to have their densest fabric in their center, with density slowly declining out to the periphery. But in Clemson, that drop-off in density happens really quickly, in just a fraction of the distance as in Athens. And here are a few more examples of how density declines from peer community centers. None are quite as consistently low density, and none drop off quite so quickly as Clemson. So in Clemson, not only is downtown fairly low density, but density also drops off really quickly from there. So this development pattern is kind of a challenge that Clemson's inherited. It limits Clemson's ability to grow near its center, where most of the employment is, or in other words, where it might make the most sense from the point of view of traffic, walkability, and infrastructure. If you remember from the growth video, development pressure and growth are coming to the city of Clemson. But the good news is that there are still places to accommodate that growth. And we'll talk more about those in a second. But first, let's look at what development would look like at different densities. If you look at a football stadium without the end zones, you end up with about an acre of land. Let's use that as a measure for the footprint of development at different densities, zooming out to see the impact on land area in Clemson. For this exercise, we'll simply imagine 500 units of new development. If those 500 units were developed at 2 units per acre, it would take up to 250 acres, or 250 memorial stadiums. At 4 units per acre, it's just half that amount of land. At 15, just 33 acres. At 25, just 20. And at 60 units per acre, just 8 acres. One of the very hardest conversations a community can have is about how development is going to impact its character. And in this case, the question is almost as simple as grow outward versus grow upward. Growing outward in a low density way means more people further from where they work, which means more traffic. But if we can find places to grow upward, that will require a lot less land and the traffic impacts won't be as great. We want to now take a look at some of the areas in Clemson that still have potential for growth. What are they? What's happening there now? And how can we think about their evolution into the future? This map is a diagram of the different types of places in Clemson. Downtown and College Avenue, sensitive historic areas, auto-oriented commercial corridors, first-generation apartments, planned development areas, and low-density single-family. Let's talk about them one at a time. First, downtown and College Avenue. This area includes Clemson's historic downtown, the intersection up at College and Tiger Boulevard, and then everything in between. There's been a lot of focus in this area. It's one of the most highly visible areas of the city and requires careful consideration. Whatever the approach, it's going to take a block-by-block level of detail to make sure that this super complex part of the city achieves its full potential as a charming, vibrant, culturally rich college downtown and Main Street environment. Second is what we'll call first-generation apartment complexes, areas with older multifamily properties built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Due to the time of their development, these properties were built in a kind of auto-oriented format, making them feel disconnected from and less walkable to other parts of the city, including the major employment center at Clemson University. These properties are also in a really wide range of condition, but many really serve as an important part of the city's workforce housing stock. Other communities are looking at their first-generation apartment stock and figuring out ways to improve the property condition while maintaining affordability. And others are finding ways to add to this workforce rental stock, but in a more updated and walkable format. Along Tiger, Old Greenville Highway, 93, and South 76 are auto-oriented commercial corridors. These corridors have a range of commercial uses: retail, office, hotel, auto service, but all are pushed back from the street and connected by really auto-oriented infrastructure. Many communities are rethinking these types of corridors, imagining infill closer up to the street, and shifting roads to include comfortable infrastructure for all modes of transportation, including pedestrians, cyclists, and transit, as well as cars. Is this a direction Clemson would like to go? We have learned about the important history and sensitivity in areas like Calhoun and Cadillac Heights. Like we discussed in the inclusivity video, there's really deep concern about how encroaching commercial and student housing development is impacting these neighborhoods. How can Clemson protect these areas from development while also investing in quality infrastructure, parks, and amenities here? In the planned development areas, we see new urbanism development and planning underway. New urbanism is a movement that developed in reaction to development in the 1980s and 1990s that was devoid of place. What we see in Patrick Square and the Pacolet-Milliken project are efforts to employ best practices to reintroduce a street grid, add a mix of uses, a mix of housing types, use land efficiently, and add walkable infrastructure. While these new design principles are really a significant improvement on past development patterns, they don't fully resolve the economic or policy challenges of incorporating affordable housing and commercial uses into new construction and new development. This will require new and different strategies, which we'll explore in the next phase. Last but not least are Clemson's low-density single-family areas. These are dominated by the larger lot zoning we described in the density section. These areas are also where much of the vacant land in the community exists. As we described in the inclusivity video, it is really difficult to build new housing that is affordable to a broad range of Clemson residents and workers at these lower densities, especially in high-value locations. Some communities are beginning to allow what's called missing middle housing types: small lot single-family, duplexes, quadplexes, and townhomes that lie somewhere between single-family and multifamily housing density and can bring construction costs into a more attainable range.
Congratulations, Clemson. You did it. If you're watching this, you've watched the last of 6 videos about existing conditions for ClemsonNEXT, the strategic plan for land use for the City of Clemson. You've nailed it. Hopefully in this process, you've been able to learn a little bit about cities, about planning, about the way your city works, some of the opportunities and challenges that we've identified. Now we need to learn from you. We need to hear from you. Take the surveys. Let us know what you think. We can't do this without your participation and your input. So thank you for your involvement. Please continue to visit this website. There will be updates moving forward. We'll be putting strategies forth based on your input. We simply cannot do this without you. Thank you so much, Clemson.